On a freezing autumn night in October 1957, the sky over the United States became a chilling canvas of absolute geopolitical terror, a moment that would forever alter the course of human history. As millions of ordinary American families gathered around their living room television sets and radios, a rhythmic, ominous, and unyielding electronic beep echoed from the heavens, piercing through the quiet confidence of post-World War II America. This was the sound of Sputnik 1, a highly polished silver sphere no larger than a beach ball, launched into the cosmic dark by the Soviet Union. It was not merely a scientific satellite. It was a terrifying demonstration of communist technological dominance that shattered the illusion of American exceptionalism and left the Western world in a state of profound psychological shock. The message broadcasted by that relentless electronic pulse was loud, clear, and deeply disturbing. The ultimate enemy of democracy now possessed the ultimate high ground, floating effortlessly above the defenses of the United States. In the frantic, smoke-filled halls of Washington, D.C., a massive wave of panic swept through the highest echelons of the government, forcing President Dwight D. Eisenhower to confront the grim reality that the nation was fundamentally unprepared for this new, volatile cosmic battleground. The space race had officially begun, and the stakes were nothing less than total global survival, sparking a ruthless rise in military and scientific competition between two atomic superpowers. Millions of dollars were instantly funneled into the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, an organization that would soon be aggressively reorganized and transformed into the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA. This monumental shift ignited a desperate, high-stakes crusade to conquer the stars, a multi-billion-dollar machine roaring to life to reclaim American pride and security. Yet, beneath the grand, soaring patriotic speeches about liberty, democracy, and pioneering the final frontier, lay in ugly truth a deeply hidden history and a collection of unsolved mysteries that standard school textbooks have systematically buried, obscured, and scrubbed from the national consciousness for over half a century. While the United States proudly broadcasted its moral superiority to the entire world, portraying itself as the global beacon of freedom fighting a fierce ideological war against totalitarian tyranny, it was simultaneously enforcing a brutal, hypocritical, and deeply entrenched system of racial apartheid within its very own borders. Deep in the heart of Hampton, Virginia, at the historic Langley Research Center, the complex mathematical equations required to break the bonds of Earth's gravity, stabilize supersonic flight, and calculate orbital trajectories were not being solved exclusively by the celebrated white male engineers who dominated the public newsreels and government press releases. Instead, the true trajectory of the American space program, the vital mathematical foundation that kept rockets from exploding and allowed human beings to survive the harsh vacuum of space, was being calculated by an elite, completely segregated group of brilliant African American women. These were the human computers, minds of unprecedented mathematical genius who found themselves trapped inside a physical and social world strictly defined by the cruel, humiliating restrictions of Jim Crow laws. This shocking reality meant that while these extraordinary women were tasked with the monumental, existential responsibility of saving the free world from Soviet annihilation, they were legally forbidden by state and local laws from sitting at the same lunch tables, drinking from the same water fountains, or even entering the same restrooms as their white, male colleagues. It is a forbidden history defined by an intense, deeply moving human drama, where the ultimate intellectual elite of a minority population had to fight two monumental wars simultaneously, one against the cold and forgiving laws of orbital mechanics, and another against the deeply entrenched, systematic racism of their own government and society. The world outside only saw the shining, pristine metal of the Saturn rockets, the heroic, confident grins of the all-white astronaut corps, and the flawless, high-tech precision of mission control. But what they hid from you was the raw, agonizing, and quiet sacrifice of the black scientists who labored in the literal shadows of the West Area Computing Unit. They were completely invisible to the public eye, yet they were entirely indispensable to the survival of the nation. The historical erasure of these individuals was not a sudden, malicious conspiracy of absolute silence, but rather a comfortable, collective national amnesia that actively sought to protect the image of a white-dominated scientific establishment during the height of the Cold War. To truly understand how America, successfully reached the moon, and won the ultimate geopolitical gamble. We must first peel back the sanitized, romanticized layers of government propaganda and confront the raw, uncomfortable truth of a segregated laboratory where intellectual brilliance knew no color, but the law certainly did. Warning: prepare to have everything you thought you knew about the heroic dawn of space exploration completely shattered, as we unmasked the untold story of the secret masterminds who quietly rewrote human destiny from behind a plywood wall of forced segregation. These women entered the workspace wearing immaculate professional attire, carrying the intellectual weight of a global superpower on their shoulders, only to be reminded every single day of their forced second-class citizenship by a small, crudely painted cardboard sign in the back of the cafeteria that read, with devastating simplicity, "Colored computers." This single, stark image encapsulates the profound paradox of mid-century America, a nation reaching for the infinite potential of the cosmos while remaining stubbornly shackled to the archaic, hateful prejudices of its past. As the gears of the American military-industrial complex ground into motion to counter the Soviet threat, the demand for mathematical calculations reached an unprecedented, frantic peak, forcing the federal government to look into places it had previously ignored, setting the stage for a dramatic collision between systemic oppression and undeniable human genius. The state of Virginia itself was embroiled in a bitter campaign of massive resistance, where local politicians openly vowed to shut down public schools rather than allow black and white children to sit in the same classrooms. Yet, inside the secured perimeter of Langley, the laws of mathematics demanded absolute precision, an absolute truth that could care less about the color of the hand holding the pencil, creating a tense, hyper-pressurized environment where these hidden pioneers quietly laid the groundwork for America's ultimate victory. To step across the heavily fortified threshold of the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory in the early 1940s and 1950s was to enter a highly complex, hyper-stratified microcosm of the American soul, a place where cutting-edge scientific innovation collided brutally with the ancient, rigid social architecture of racial segregation. The real reason behind the sudden, desperate influx of African-American mathematical talent into this ultra-classified federal facility was not a sudden burst of moral enlightenment by white administrative masterminds, but rather the cold, calculating desperation of World War II and the subsequent onset of the Cold War. In 1941, under immense political pressure from civil rights leaders who threatened a massive march on Washington, President Franklin D. Roosevelt reluctantly signed Executive Order 8802, a historic decree that officially prohibited racial discrimination in the nation's defense industries and established the Fair Employment Practices Committee. This single piece of paper acted as a catalytic forcing mechanism, opening the heavily fortified gates of the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, or NACA, to an elite echelon of black women who possessed extraordinary intellectual brilliance. These women had conquered the rigorous academic landscapes of historically black colleges and universities, earning advanced degrees in mathematics, physics, and chemistry. Yet their professional options had been brutally restricted to teaching in underfunded, segregated public schools. When the federal civil service exams threw open a narrow window of opportunity, these hidden pioneers seized it, packing their bags and traveling to Hampton, Virginia, completely unaware that they were entering a psychological battlefield that would test the very limits of their human endurance. Upon their arrival at Langley, the grim reality of state-enforced segregation immediately asserted itself with jarring, dehumanizing force. As these brilliant minds were systematically isolated from the main civilian workforce and funneled into the remote, geographically segregated laboratory complex known as the West Area Computing Unit. The true story of West computing is a forgotten tale of absolute intellectual triumph in the face of calculated social erasure. A place where these extraordinary women were forced to navigate a toxic environment designed to make them feel utterly invisible. Surrounded by the constant, deafening roar of supersonic wind tunnels and the high-stakes pressure of national security deadlines, they worked in a separate, stifling room where their very presence was demarcated by a stark, humiliating physical environment. The white female computers worked in the East Area, enjoying modern facilities, social prestige, and direct collaboration with the male engineers, while the West Area computers were confined to a separate workspace, forced to use separate dining facilities, and subjected to the constant, watchful eyes of a white supervisory apparatus that viewed them with deep skepticism. Yet, beneath the shadow of these discriminatory practices, a quiet mastermind was rising, a woman whose profound foresight and unbreakable resilience would permanently alter the trajectory of the American space program. Dorothy Vaughan. Hired in 1943 as a temporary wartime employee, Dorothy Vaughan was a mathematical prodigy and an organizational genius who quickly recognized that the work being done in West computing was the literal lifeblood of NAC's aeronautical breakthroughs. In 1949, following years of relentless, flawless performance, she achieved a historic milestone by being appointed as the first African-American supervisor at NACA, a position that gave her a fragile foothold of authority within an agency dominated by white male supremacy. Dorothy Vaughan was not merely a manager. She was a brilliant, strategic protector of her women, navigating the treacherous corporate and political waters of Langley with the calculating precision of a grandmaster playing a high-stakes game of chess. She knew that any mistake made by a single black computer would be weaponized by racist administrators to condemn the entire unit. So she demanded absolute mathematical perfection, rigorously reviewing every single slide rule calculation, every complex differential equation, and every aerodynamic data plot before it ever left the West area. She fought aggressively behind closed doors for promotions, equal pay, and professional recognition for her staff, deliberately placing her most talented computers into specialized engineering groups where their undeniable genius could not be ignored. As the 1950s drew to a close and the space race accelerated into frantic overdrive, a catastrophic threat began to loom on the technological horizon, an existential shift that threatened to render the entire West Area computing unit permanently obsolete. NASA began installing the earliest iterations of electronic mainframe computers, the massive, temperamental, and incredibly powerful IBM 7090 data processing systems. Machines capable of performing complex mathematical calculations at speeds that no human mind, no matter how brilliant, could ever hope to match. While the majority of human computers and traditional engineers viewed these alien metal monoliths with a mixture of fear, bewilderment, and dismissive skepticism, Dorothy Vaughan possessed the uncanny, prophetic vision to unmask the future. She understood with absolute clarity that if her women remained bound to their mechanical adding machines and slide rules, the changing tides of technology would be used as a convenient excuse by the administration to quietly dissolve the West Area unit and discard these black scientists into the trash heap of history. Instead of panicking or retreating into despair, Dorothy Vaughan orchestrated a brilliant, secret plot of self-education and technological mastery that remains one of the most astonishing and told stories of the entire space age. Sneaking into the restricted mainframe rooms after regular hours to study the complex technical manuals of the IBM machines, she completely decoded the mysterious, intricate logic of FORTRAN, the pioneering computer programming language that controlled the electronic beast. She did not keep this forbidden knowledge to herself. Instead, she transformed the West Area computing room into a clandestine, highly illegal nighttime training academy. Under the dim glow of fluorescent lights, away from the prying eyes of NASA's senior management, Dorothy Vaughan painstakingly taught her group of black women how to write code, debug complex programming sequences, and master the very technology that was designed to replace them. When the white engineers at NASA finally realized that they lacked the technical expertise to operate the newly installed IBM mainframes properly, causing expensive delays and massive data backlogs, Dorothy Vaughan stepped forward out of the shadows. She presented the administration with an undeniable, shocking fact: her entire team of West Area computers was already fully trained, highly proficient, and ready to take absolute command of the electronic computing division. By mastering the future before anyone else even realized it had arrived, Dorothy Vaughan completely outmaneuvered the systemic racism of the era, forcing NASA to dissolve the segregated West Area computing pool and integrate the electronic data processing divisions under her direct, indispensable leadership, ensuring that the hidden pioneers of her unit would become the very masterminds who encoded the mathematical coordinates that would eventually launch mankind toward the lunar surface. Among the galaxy of brilliant minds confined to the West Area computing unit, there was one mathematical prodigy whose sheer intellectual force and unbreakable spirit would completely shatter the rigid, male-dominated hierarchy of the American scientific establishment, Katherine Johnson. In 1953, what began as a temporary, routine 2-week assignment to the Flight Research Division would evolve into an untold history of absolute defiance, changing the trajectory of space exploration forever. To understand the shocking facts of her entry into this hyper-exclusive world, one must picture the scene: an expansive, high-tech laboratory filled entirely with white, male engineers clad in immaculate white shirts, skinny ties, and a thick cloud of tobacco smoke, looking down with cold skepticism at a newly arrived black woman. This was the Space Mechanics Division, the absolute nerve center of America's cosmic ambitions, where the laws of aerodynamics were being rewritten in real time. Katherine Johnson was not brought into this room to be a celebrated collaborator. The real reason she was there was to act as a subservient, human data processor, performing the grueling, tedious calculations that the male engineers deemed beneath their professional dignity. Yet, Katherine Johnson utterly refused to be treated as an invisible, disposable asset. She possessed a profound, unyielding curiosity that quickly weaponized her mathematical brilliance, transforming her from a simple calculator into a strategic mastermind. While other human computers quietly accepted the data sheets handed to them without question, Katherine constantly asked why. She demanded to know why a specific formula was being used, what the overall trajectory represented, and where the final spacecraft was intended to land. This insatiable drive for absolute knowledge was viewed as a dangerous provocation by the traditionalist puppet masters of Langley, who expected quiet and questioning compliance from their segregated staff. The grim reality of the era dictated that women, especially black women, were strictly forbidden from attending the highly classified editorial briefings where critical spaceflight data, orbital parameters, and mission logistics were discussed and decided. These closed-door meetings were the inner sanctum of power, where male engineers debated the fate of the nation's space program. Katherine quickly realized that by the time the data reached her desk, the parameters had already changed, making her work inefficient and prone to the fatal mistakes caused by delayed communication. When she asked to attend these secret briefings, her white male superiors flatly denied her request, stating with absolute finality that women simply do not go to the meetings. Instead of retreating into submissive silence, Katherine unmasked the arbitrary nature of their prejudice with a single sharp and undeniable question: is there a law against it? Caught completely off guard by her fierce confidence and the undeniable logic of her argument, the engineers reluctantly conceded that no such law existed. Through sheer force of personality and unmatched intellectual dominance, Katherine Johnson forced her way into the inner sanctum of NASA's elite, breaking the mathematical glass ceiling decades before the modern world would even coin the term. Inside those hyper-pressurized briefing rooms, she did not merely sit in the back. She actively dominated the blackboard, using her mastery of analytic geometry to solve complex, multivariable problems that had left her white male colleagues entirely baffled. This was a true story of intellectual survival in a hostile environment where the stakes were impossibly high. The United States was desperately scrambling to launch its first astronaut, Alan Shepard, into suborbital flight aboard the Freedom 7 capsule, a mission that carried the entire geopolitical pride of the Western world. A single mathematical error, a slight miscalculation in the atmospheric re-entry angle, or a forgotten variable in the Earth's rotation would result in a catastrophic disaster, sending America's first space hero plunging to a fiery death or leaving him hopelessly lost in the infinite expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The task of calculating the exact launch window, the precise flight trajectory, and the critical recovery coordinates fell squarely upon the shoulders of Katherine Johnson. She famously told her superiors to tell her exactly where they wanted the astronaut to land, and she would work the math backward to tell them exactly where and when to launch the rocket. Operating under an intense and forgiving spotlight of national anxiety, she calculated the flight path using raw human intellect, her pencil flying across sheets of parchment paper with a precision that outpaced the primitive electronic machinery of the time. The hidden history of Freedom 7 is that its success did not belong solely to the brave astronaut in the cockpit or the charismatic directors at Mission Control. It belonged to the secret, African-American woman who mapped out every single inch of that historic journey from behind a desk she wasn't legally supposed to share with her peers. The ugly truth of her situation was that while her mind was trusted with the lives of America's greatest heroes and the ultimate secrets of national defense, her body was still subject to the degrading, humiliating realities of Jim Crow Virginia outside those laboratory walls. She was a scientific elite inside the briefing room, but the moment she stepped outside, she was instantly relegated to a second-class citizen, forced to navigate a world that actively sought to suppress her humanity. This profound paradox did not break her. Instead, it fueled a relentless rise to prominence within the agency. As white engineers slowly realized that Katherine Johnson's mathematical calculations were the only infallible safety net they possessed against global humiliation, her work on Project Mercury exposed the absolute absurdity of racial supremacy, proving that in the cold, objective vacuum of space, the universe yields its deepest secrets only to the most brilliant minds, regardless of the skin color of the scientist holding the chalk. Her mastery of celestial navigation and orbital mechanics became so legendary that she became an indispensable pillar of the entire Apollo program, a forgotten tale of triumph that would remain locked away in classified archives for generations. A silent masterpiece of human drama hidden behind the roaring engines of the American space machine. The physical geography of the Langley Research Center during the frantic, hyper-pressurized dawn of the space race was not merely a layout of cutting-edge laboratories, supersonic wind tunnels, and elite administrative offices. It was a deeply fractured, hyper-segregated map of racial apartheid that inflicted a devastating, continuous physical and psychological toll on the African-American women who worked there. The grim reality of everyday life under Jim Crow laws in Virginia meant that the vast, sprawling campus of Langley was an absolute trap of structural humiliation, a dark side of the glorious American space machine that standard history textbooks have systematically hidden from the public eye for generations. To uncover this hidden history is to confront a disturbing, shocking truth about the sheer scale of human drama occurring behind the scenes of America's cosmic triumphs. While the white male engineers and politicians celebrated the soaring, immaculate heights of the nation's technological breakthroughs, the secret black scientists of the West Area Computing Unit were forced to navigate a daily obstacle course of state-enforced degradation. Perhaps the most iconic, shocking facts regarding this systemic cruelty centered around a basic, inescapable human necessity, the restroom. When Katherine Johnson and her brilliant, black colleagues were assigned to specialized engineering groups in the East Area or the main administrative buildings to calculate hypersonic flight trajectories and orbital re-entry parameters, they were confronted with an immediate, dehumanizing crisis. The buildings they were sent to work in, filled with the absolute intellectual elite of the Western world, did not possess a single restroom designated for non-white women. This meant that a brilliant mathematician, while simultaneously solving complex differential equations that prevented multi-million-dollar rockets from vaporizing upon atmospheric re-entry, would suddenly be forced to stop her work, pack up her pencils, and begin a long, exhausting, and deeply humiliating half-mile run across the entire Langley campus, rain or shine, in the sweltering heat of a Virginia summer or the freezing winds of winter, just to find a restroom in the West Area that bore the crudely painted, insulting sign reading colored women. This was a true story of profound psychological warfare waged by a government against its own most valuable intellectual assets. A calculated effort to extract maximum scientific labor while actively denying basic human dignity. Warning: do not look away from the sheer cruelty of this historical paradox, where the minds trusted with the ultimate secrets of national defense and the survival of America's greatest space heroes were legally treated as biological hazards and fit to share a toilet seat with their white peers. This daily, exhausting marathon was not just a physical hardship. It was a psychological assault designed to remind these extraordinary women of their forced second-class citizenship every single day. An ugly truth that punctured the grand illusion of American moral superiority during the height of the Cold War. What they hid from you was the intense, boiling anger and exhaustion that these hidden pioneers had to bury deep within their souls, masking their pain beneath an unbreakable, immaculate professional composure, because any public display of frustration or emotional breakdown would be instantly weaponized by racist administrators to justify the immediate dissolution of their unit and the erasure of their achievements. The complex societal architecture of Virginia at the time was defined by massive resistance, a statewide political strategy orchestrated by white supremacist politicians who went so far as to defund and completely shut down public school systems rather than allow black and white children to sit in the same classrooms. This toxic, volatile atmosphere bled directly through the secured gates of Langley, creating a hyper-pressurized, hostile workspace where every glance from a white colleague, every whispers in the hallway, and every cold shoulder at the water fountain was a reminder of the systemic backstabbing and institutional racism that sought to undermine their presence. Even the simple act of having lunch was turned into a theater of forced segregation, an unsolved mystery of cultural cruelty where these elite mathematicians were legally forbidden from eating in the main cafeteria alongside the white engineers. Instead, they were relegated to a separate, isolated corner of the dining facility, sitting behind a literal plywood barrier or a small cardboard sign that screamed colored computers, a physical wall built specifically to shield white workers from the supposed contamination of eating in the presence of black genius. Yet, inside this oppressive cauldron of systemic injustice, an extraordinary and yielding resilience emerged, as these secret masterminds refused to let the smallness of human prejudice dictate the immensity of their cosmic vision. They knew with absolute, mathematical certainty that the cold and yielding laws of physics, the mathematics of celestial navigation, and the principles of hypersonic aerodynamics did not care about the color of the hand holding the pencil or the race of the mind calculating the trajectory. The universe yielded its deepest, most classified secrets only to the absolute most brilliant intellects. And in that objective, mathematical arena, the hidden pioneers of West Area computing were completely untouchable, routinely outperforming and correcting the work of the very white male colleagues who refused to share a restroom with them. They weaponized their absolute precision, turning their flawless calculations into a powerful shield against racial erasure and corporate backstabbing, forcing the traditionalist hierarchy of NASA to slowly, reluctantly acknowledge that without these black women, the American space program would suffer a catastrophic global defeat at the hands of the Soviet Union. These forgotten tales of daily endurance, of running half a mile through the mud of Langley while mentally mapping out the geometry of a lunar landing, form the true, agonizing bedrock upon which America's ultimate victory in the space race was built. A testament to a group of women who conquered the infinite expanse of the cosmos while simultaneously shackled by the cruelest, most earthbound prejudices of their nation. To fully comprehend the breathtaking scale of the human drama unfolding inside the segregated laboratories of the American space program, one must shift their gaze away from the theoretical calculation desks of Katherine Johnson and step directly into the roaring, metal-clattered cavern of the supersonic pressure tunnel at the Langley Research Center, a place where a brilliant mathematical mastermind named Mary Jackson was about to launch a revolutionary, high-stakes legal crusade against the state-enforced segregation of the American South. Hired in 1951 as a human computer within the West Area Computing Unit, Mary Jackson was a woman of fierce intellect, boundless energy, and an unyielding commitment to physical and engineering sciences. Her extraordinary talent for analyzing raw data gathered from high-speed wind tunnel experiments quickly caught the attention of Kazimierz Czernetsky, an open-minded white senior engineer who managed the highly advanced 4-foot by 4-foot supersonic pressure tunnel, a massive technological beast capable of generating winds twice the speed of sound to test the structural integrity of future spacecraft and supersonic military aircraft. Czernetsky recognized that Mary Jackson possessed a rare, innate intuitive grasp of mechanical engineering and fluid dynamics that went far beyond basic data processing, and he aggressively urged her to transcend her role as a mere human computer and apply for the elite rank of an aerospace engineer within NASA, a prestigious title that was completely dominated by an all-white, all-male scientific aristocracy. However, this career advancement path was deliberately engineered into an absolute trap, a systemic barrier designed to maintain racial homogeneity within the upper echelons of federal science, bringing Mary Jackson face-to-face with the grim reality of a deeply institutionalized conspiracy of exclusion. To qualify for the official title of aerospace engineer, the Federal Civil Service Guidelines mandated that an applicant complete comprehensive, graduate-level coursework in advanced mathematics and physics. These ultra-classified, rigorous courses were administered exclusively by the University of Virginia, but due to the rigid and yielding social architecture of the Jim Crow era, The classes were physically hosted after regular working hours inside the hallways of Hampton High School. The shocking facts of this situation revealed an ugly truth that standard American school textbooks have actively scrubbed from history for decades. Hampton High School was a strictly segregated, all-white public institution, protected by the full, violent authority of Virginia state law, under the toxic political campaign of massive resistance. It was fundamentally illegal for an African American citizen to set foot inside that building, let alone sit at a desk alongside white students to earn advanced credentials. For Mary Jackson, this educational roadblock was a forbidden history of profound injustice. Her own federal government was demanding that she acquire specialized triadic knowledge to help win a global Cold War against the Soviet Union, while the local laws of her home state explicitly made the acquisition of that knowledge a criminal act, a dangerous provocation against the racial status quo. Instead of retreating into defeated submissive silence or accepting the artificial limits placed upon her humanity by white supremacist puppet masters, Mary Jackson made a bold, terrifying decision that sent shockwaves through the local political establishment. She resolved to fight the law in an open court of justice, filing a formal legal petition against the city of Hampton, Virginia, demanding a special exception that would legally allow her to enter the all-white high school building after sunset. This was an unprecedented, highly volatile power play that put Mary Jackson in a position of extreme vulnerability, exposing her and her family to potential professional backstabbing, social ostracization, and the very real threat of physical retaliation from white extremist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, who fiercely patrolled the boundaries of racial segregation in Virginia. When the historic day of the hearing arrived, Mary Jackson stepped into the cold, intimidating blue atmosphere of the municipal courtroom, standing completely alone before a traditionalist white judge who held absolute power over her professional destiny and the trajectory of her life. The atmosphere was thick with tension and intense human drama where the archaic, hateful prejudices of the past stood in direct and compromising opposition to the infinite potential of human genius. The judge, holding her petition with cold skepticism, questioned why a black woman would dare to disturb the delicate social peace of the community by demanding entry into an all-white sanctuary, rather than launching into an emotional plea for civil rights or social equality arguments that would have been instantly rejected and dismissed by the conservative puppet masters of the court. Mary Jackson unleashed a brilliant, meticulously calculated psychological counter-strategy that unmasked the profound global stakes of her individual struggle. She looked directly into the eyes of the judge, appealing to his sense of history, his ego, and the existential panic gripped by the nation since the launch of Sputnik. She reminded the judge of his own prestigious career milestones, pointing out that he had achieved historic firsts in his legal profession by being the first in his family to graduate from college and the first to ascend to that honorable bench. She then looked out the window toward the sky, delivered a chilling, undeniable warning about the reality of the space race, stating with fierce, absolute conviction that the United States was locked in a volatile, catastrophic struggle for survival against a ruthless communist empire that did not care about the skin color of the masterminds writing the equations. She argued that the nation desperately needed every single ounce of scientific brilliance it could muster to build the rockets that would carry American astronauts into the cosmos, and that Virginia could not afford to suppress intellectual genius over an arbitrary municipal ordinance. She looked the judge dead in the eye and asked him a jaw-dropping question that pierced through his judicial armor. Out of all the cases that would come before his court today, which one would truly matter 100 years from now? And would he have the courage to be the first to grant her the right to change human history? Her unmatched confidence, undeniable precision, and strategic framing left the courtroom completely speechless, completely outmaneuvering the legal mechanisms of systematic oppression. Stunned by her fierce intellectual dominance and unable to find a logical flaw in her argument, the white judge reluctantly hammered his gavel down, granting Mary Jackson the historic, unprecedented legal exception to attend the night classes at Hampton High School. Yet, winning the legal battle was merely the prelude to a grueling psychological marathon. As Mary Jackson stepped through the front doors of Hampton High School to find herself trapped inside an arena of intense, chilling hostility. As she walked down the corridors, she was met with cold, staring faces, whispered insults, and an atmosphere of profound isolation from white students who viewed her presence as a direct violation of the natural order. She sat in the back of the classroom, an isolated pioneer surrounded by a sea of prejudice, yet she refused to let the toxic environment fracture her concentration. She weaponized her absolute mathematical perfection, answering every complex question with flawless accuracy, turning her homework assignments into an undeniable demonstration of intellectual superiority that silenced her doubters and forced her instructors to acknowledge her undeniable brilliance. She completed the graduate-level courses with flying colors, decoding the most intricate puzzles of high-speed aerodynamics and structural engineering, proving that human genius is entirely blind to the artificial barriers of race. In 1958, Mary Jackson achieved an extraordinary, historic milestone, officially breaking through the final institutional wall to become NASA's very first African-American female engineer. An untold story of absolute legal and intellectual triumph that would pave the way for generations of minority scientists to reach for the stars from the shattered ruins of Jim Crow. To truly grasp the terrifying, high-stakes reality of the early American space program, one must leave behind the calculated, theoretical sanctuary of Langley's mathematical pools and travel deep into the sun-scorched, volatile coastal swamps of Cape Canaveral, Florida, where the raw, mechanical hardware of the space race was forged, tested, and launched amidst a toxic cauldron of racial hostility and systemic terror. This is the setting for a deeply disturbing, untold history centering on a brilliant young African-American pioneer named Julius Montgomery, who in 1956 achieved a historic yet incredibly perilous milestone by becoming the absolute first black electronics technician ever hired at Cape Canaveral, breaking a fiercely guarded color barrier at the very dawn of the ballistic missile era. While standard historical narratives focus entirely on the soaring, triumphant arcs of rockets piercing the stratosphere, they actively cover up the grim reality and dark side of the human drama unfolding on the ground, where the battlefield was not merely ideological but intensely physical and psychological. Julius Montgomery was a highly educated veteran of the United States Air Force, possessing an elite technical mastery of electronics, radar systems, and ballistic telemetry that made him an indispensable asset to the military-industrial complex as it scrambled to counter the Soviet atomic threat. Yet, when he stepped onto the secured perimeter of the Cape as an employee of RCA, a major federal contractor, his advanced credentials provided absolutely no protection against the savage, deeply entrenched prejudices of the American Jim Crow South. The shocking facts of his very first day at work reveal an ugly truth about the scientific establishment that has been hidden from standard school textbooks for over half a century, as Montgomery was introduced to his new team of white technicians and engineers, men who were tasked with the existential responsibility of ensuring national security. A freezing, collective silence gripped the room, and every single white man systematically refused to shake his hand, looking at him with open disgust and unmasked hostility. This calculated act of social ostracization was merely the prelude to a far more dangerous, volatile conspiracy of silent sabotage and systemic backstabbing that threatened not only Julius Montgomery's professional survival but his literal life. Brevard County, Florida, in the mid-1950s, was a notoriously hostile territory where the Ku Klux Klan maintained a powerful, violent, and deeply integrated stranglehold over local politics, law enforcement, and the civilian workforce, creating an environment where white supremacist ideology bled directly into the high-tech laboratories of the space program. Montgomery quickly discovered that several of his white colleagues and supervisors were active, card-carrying members or sympathizers of the KKK, creating an unholy paradox where the masterminds building America's celestial chariots were simultaneously plotting the violent enforcement of domestic racial apartheid. This was a forbidden history defined by an intense psychological war. Montgomery routinely found ominous KKK literature left conspicuously on his desk, a chilling warning that his presence was viewed as a dangerous provocation against the natural order, and that his daily commute down the isolated and lit rural roads of Florida was a terrifying gamble with death. Inside the hangar bays and launch complexes, where a single loose wire or a miscalculated voltage could result in a catastrophic, multi-million-dollar fatal mistake, his white peers engaged in a ruthless rise of covert warfare against him. They would intentionally mislabel complex circuitry diagrams, deliberately alter calibration settings on his testing equipment, and engage in the silent, systematic sabotage of his telemetry tools. praying that he would commit a high-profile engineering error that would justify his immediate termination, ruin his career, or make him the public scapegoat for an explosive rocket failure. This was a true story of absolute isolation in a hyper-pressurized arena where the stakes were nothing less than global dominance. A dark hidden history of how systematic oppression sought to crush minority genius under the guise of technological perfection. Julius Montgomery, however, possessed a brilliant, calculating strategic mind that allowed him to outmaneuver this structural trap with the precision of a seasoned chess grandmaster. He quickly realized that he could not afford to make even a microscopic mistake. He had to be completely flawless, turning his technical accuracy into an unbreakable shield against institutional backstabbing. He arrived at the hangar hours before his colleagues, meticulously rate-checking every single wire, verifying every telemetry link, and completely memorizing the vast, intricate schematic maps of the early intercontinental ballistic missiles, demonstrating an unmatched intellectual dominance that slowly, reluctantly forced the traditionalist white scientific hierarchy to acknowledge his absolute value. The ultimate climax of his struggle occurred when a critical, high-profile missile launch faced an expensive, terrifying delay due to a mysterious, unsolved mystery in the complex communication and tracking systems that baffled the entire white engineering staff. As the countdown clock ticked down toward a catastrophic, public failure, Julius Montgomery stepped forward into the high-stress nerve center, diagnosing and fixing the highly classified electronic flow within a matter of minutes through sheer intuitive genius, saving the mission and forcing his white peers to realize that their own professional survival and national pride were entirely dependent on the very black technician they had refused to touch. By surviving this gauntlet of domestic terror and technical sabotage, Julius Montgomery quietly laid the operational, real-world foundation for every single launch that would follow. From Project Mercury to the historic Apollo moon landings, proving that the pathway to the stars was paved by the raw and yielding courage of hidden pioneers who stared down death threats on the ground so that humanity could touch the infinite expanse of the heavens. On the crisp, fog-laden morning of February 20th, 1962, the entire world stood completely frozen on the edge of a terrifying precipice as a charismatic, highly decorated military pilot named John Glenn climbed into the cramped, claustrophobic cockpit of the Friendship 7 spacecraft, perched precariously atop a colossal, volatile Atlas rocket at Cape Canaveral, Florida, preparing to embark on an existential, high-stakes mission that would permanently determine the winner of the cosmic battle for global supremacy. The air was heavy with intense, suffocating national anxiety. The Soviet Union had already dealt two devastating, humiliating blows to American pride by successfully sending Yuri Gagarin and German Titov into full orbital flight, leaving the Western world trapped in a state of profound psychological panic and desperate for a triumphant, history-altering victory. In the hidden history of this fateful launch, the public only saw the grand, romanticized spectacle of a handsome, fearless white astronaut stepping into the spotlight as the ultimate symbol of American technological prowess. But what they hid from you was a deeply classified narrative of human drama, systematic skepticism, and a jaw-dropping reliance on a secret black scientist that standard history school textbooks have actively covered up for over half a century. To truly decode the shocking facts of this pivotal moment, one must unmask the intense corporate and bureaucratic power play occurring behind the closed doors of NASA's mission control, where a profound technological revolution was threatening to trigger a catastrophic, fatal mistake. For the very first time in human history, NASA had entirely bypassed traditional, manual calculation pools and entrusted the immense, multivariable equations of orbital trajectories, celestial navigation, and atmospheric re-entry windows to a newly installed network of electronic mainframe computers, the massive, primitive, and notoriously temperamental IBM 7090 data processing machines. The senior administrative masterminds and white engineering directors trusted these alien metal monoliths with absolute, blind faith, fully convinced that electronic automation had rendered human intellect entirely obsolete. However, John Glenn, possessing the razor-sharp intuition of a veteran combat aviator, harbored a deep and yielding skepticism toward these mechanical puppet masters. He knew that a single electrical short circuit, a microscopic programming glitch, or an undetected algorithmic deviation in the machine's complex FORTRAN code would result in a brutal, horrifying disaster. vaporizing him upon re-entry or leaving his capsule hopelessly lost to drift for eternity in the freezing cosmic vacuum. Just hours before the scheduled countdown clock roared to life, a sudden, chilling malfunction occurred within the IBM computer network, causing a series of erratic data discrepancies that sent a wave of panic through the engineering ranks and confirmed the astronauts' worst fears about the fragile and trustworthy nature of early electronic calculation. Refusing to risk his life on the unverified output of a malfunctioning machine, John Glenn made an unprecedented, historic demand that completely paralyzed the traditionalist hierarchy of mission control, launching a beautiful defiance against the racial and gender status quo of mid-century America. He flatly refused to launch, telling his superiors with absolute finality to get the girl, meaning Katherine Johnson, to manually recalculate the machine's entire mathematical output using her raw human intellect and a mechanical desktop calculator. John Glenn famously declared that if she says the numbers are good, if her calculations match the electronic mainframe exactly, only then would he be ready to step onto that rocket and risk his life for the United States. This was a true story of absolute, mind-bending irony and profound human drama. The most celebrated, high-profile white hero of a strictly segregated superpower was placing his literal survival, the fate of a multi-million-dollar space program, and the global reputation of the Western world, entirely into the hands of an African-American woman who was still legally barred from using the same public water fountains or sitting in the same restaurants as the engineers running the launch pad. Katherine Johnson was summoned out of the shadows of the West Area computing pool and thrown into a hyper-pressurized, hyper-focused race against time, with the eyes of the military-industrial complex buried into her back. Sitting alone at her desk, surrounded by sheets of parchment paper, slide rules, and an intense silence, she began the grueling, monumental task of manually verifying the 11-digit tracking coordinates, orbital trajectory points, and deceleration variables for 3 full orbits around the Earth. 4 hours. Her pencil flew across the paper with absolute precision and unmatched intellectual dominance, working the complex analytic geometry backward and forward, checking every single mathematical variable against the laws of orbital mechanics. She was not merely checking numbers. She was acting as the human firewall against a global, catastrophic humiliation. Her mind serving as the ultimate safety net for a nation that routinely sought to suppress her very humanity under the cruel weight of Jim Crow laws. When she finally finished her grueling calculation marathon, she delivered the final verdict. Her manual mathematical formulas matched the IBM computer plots with absolute, flawless perfection. The word was immediately flashed to John Glenn on the launch pad. The numbers are good. With his absolute trust validated by the hidden mastermind of Langley, Glenn gave the green light. The Atlas engines ignited with a deafening, earth-shaking roar, and Friendship 7 blasted through the atmosphere to achieve a historic, flawless orbital flight that electrified the entire planet. What history textbooks systematically fail to teach you is that the true trajectory of that historic flight was mapped out by the quiet and yielding genius of an African-American woman whose contribution was actively hidden from the public newsreels to maintain the comfortable illusion of an all-white scientific triumph. This ultimate demonstration of trust unmasked the profound absurdity of systematic racism, proving that when the survival of a global empire is on the line, the laws of the universe recognize no color, and the most classified secrets of cosmic travel belong exclusively to those who possess the brilliance to unlock them, marking a ruthless rise in the desegregation of America's scientific elite. As the triumphant echoing roars of Project Mercury and Gemini faded into the highly secured vaults of classified archives, the United States embarked on its most dangerous, technologically audacious, and high-stakes cosmic crusade in human history, the Apollo program, a multi-billion-dollar military-industrial machine aggressively engineered to fulfill President John F. Kennedy's historic mandate of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth before the decade's end. To understand the monumental human drama, deep-seated corporate friction, and hidden history behind this ultimate scientific achievement, one must completely pierce through the sanitized, romanticized newsreels of the era and unmask the intense mathematical warfare occurring in the quiet and lit corners of NASA where the true masterminds of the lunar landing labored in total obscurity. Away from public adulation and professional prestige, the global public was completely transfixed by the Titanic, awe-inspiring spectacle of the Saturn V rocket, a 363-foot-tall metal monolith packed with millions of pounds of highly volatile rocket fuel. Designed under the watchful eye of former Nazi aerospace engineer Werner von Braun to break the bonds of Earth's gravity with earth-shattering, terrifying force. Yet, what they hid from you was the terrifying, grim reality that this colossal machine was an absolute trap of astronomical variables. A volatile leviathan that would instantly transform into a catastrophic, fiery tomb for its brave crew if even a single microscopic digit in its flight path, velocity parameters, or orbital coordinates was miscalculated by a fraction of a millimeter. The task of calculating the precise launch windows, the intricate lunar orbit insertion parameters, the multivariable gravitational vectors, and the razor-thin atmospheric reentry corridors did not belong solely to the celebrated white male engineering aristocracy who dominated the public spotlights at mission control, but rather to the forgotten code and absolute precision of the secret black scientists who had systematically broken through the legal walls of forced segregation. Katherine Johnson, now recognized within the agency as an indispensable, peerless pillar of the Space Mechanics Division, was trusted with the ultimate existential responsibility of mapping the mathematical highway that would connect the Earth to the lunar surface. A forbidden history of unmatched intellectual dominance that standard school textbooks have systematically covered up and scrubbed from the national consciousness for over half a century. While electronic mainframe computers had achieved a ruthless rise in computational speed and data processing power, their early operations remained deeply unstable, plagued by mysterious bugs, programming blackouts, and mechanical glitches, forcing NASA's senior directors to rely on Katherine's mind as the absolute, infallible safety net against catastrophic global humiliation. She did not merely double-check the electronic computer's plots. She explicitly authored the highly classified mathematical calculations and celestial navigation maps for the Apollo 11 mission in July 1969, calculating the exact moment the Saturn V had to ignite its engines to intercept a moving celestial target over 230,000 miles away in the dark expanse of deep space. Her calculations dictated the exact geometry of the translunar injection burn, the precise velocity requirements, and the critical three-dimensional coordinate loops that allowed Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins to successfully enter lunar orbit. A true story of celestial masterminding that remains a shocking, jaw-dropping revelation to those who believe that genius is defined by race or gender boundaries. Simultaneously, the digital nervous system of the Apollo program was being sustained and defended by the brilliant, prophetic leadership of Dorothy Vaughan, who led the integrated electronic computing division with absolute strategic perfection and foresight. Her team of black FORTRAN programmers meticulously translated raw, complex orbital mechanics equations into the precise digital code that controlled the spacecraft's guidance systems, ensuring that the automated networks of the command and lunar modules remained functional amidst the volatile, unpredictable conditions of cosmic radiation and deep space travel. Without their hidden code and relentless debugging marathons, the primitive guidance computers of the era would have suffered fatal data overloads, effectively blinding the astronauts and stranding them forever to drift in the freezing cosmic vacuum. Furthermore, the structural resilience of the Apollo command module itself, its absolute ability to withstand the savage, bone-crushing friction and 5,000-degree thermal heat of atmospheric reentry was validated by the relentless, complex aerodynamic wind tunnel experiments conducted by Mary Jackson, NASA's first black female engineer, whose advanced testing methodologies formed a hidden masterpiece of structural defense that protected the lives of the crew during their violent plunge back to Earth. Warning: do not look away from the chilling, high-stakes reality of this history, for the absolute triumph of Apollo 11's lunar landing was instantly followed by the terrifying, near-fatal crisis of Apollo 13 in April 1970, a real-world nightmare that pushed the entire space program to the absolute edge of total annihilation, when an oxygen tank violently exploded in the deep space void, crippling the service module and leaving astronauts Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes trapped inside a freezing, dying spacecraft with rapidly depleting power, water, and breathable oxygen. The entire nation was plunged into an agonizing state of absolute panic and helplessness. as the primary electronic computing systems failed and standard tracking networks became completely useless. The traditionalist hierarchy at Mission Control faced a catastrophic, time-sensitive emergency. They had to rewrite the spacecraft's entire flight trajectory from scratch to bring the crew home alive before their fragile life support vanished completely. In this darkest hour of national anxiety, the urgent call went out once again to the secret masterminds of Langley, and Katherine Johnson stepped into the hyper-pressurized cauldron to solve a seemingly impossible mathematical puzzle. Operating under an intense, suffocating clock, she manually calculated the complex emergency backup procedures, developing an audacious, high-risk trajectory that would weaponize the moon's own gravitational field as a cosmic slingshot, creating a free return trajectory that would loop the crippled spacecraft around the far side of the moon and fling it back toward Earth with maximum velocity. Her pencil flew across the parchment maps with absolute, flawless precision, factoring in the erratic, tumbling weight of the damaged module, the changing atmospheric entry angles, and the critical burning times for the remaining lunar module engines. A single error of a fraction of a degree would cause the capsule to either skip off the Earth's atmosphere like a stone on water, bouncing helplessly into deep space, or burn up completely like a falling star, a horrifying, ugly truth that rested entirely on her mathematical shoulders. Through her unmatched genius and the forgotten code of her team, the calculations were delivered to the frantic crew in deep space. The emergency engines fired with absolute accuracy, and the world watched in stunned, tearful disbelief as Apollo 13 successfully splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. A miraculous rescue that was fundamentally engineered by the hidden pioneers of West computing. The shocking facts of their life-saving interventions exposed the complete absurdity of the systemic racism that had sought to erase them, proving that the pathway to the stars and the salvation of America's greatest heroes was built upon the unyielding brilliance of black women who quietly conquered the infinite cosmos while shackled by the prejudices of their nation. The final echoes of the Apollo program's roaring engines slowly dissolved into the increasingly volatile landscape of the early 1970s, as a deeply fractured United States found itself gripped by the agonizing quagmire of the Vietnam War, the explosive human drama of the civil rights movement, and the seismic political betrayal of the Watergate scandal. In this chaotic environment, a quiet, calculated bureaucratic curtain was aggressively pulled shut over the contributions of the West Area Computing Unit, transitioning their extraordinary achievements from the front line of national triumph into the dark, silent vaults of classified history. The grim reality of their sudden erasure from the public consciousness was not a bizarre, accidental oversight, but rather the manifestation of a comfortable, systematic choice by the federal government and mainstream media to maintain a highly sanitized, romanticized image of the American space age. For over half a century, standard history school textbooks completely scrubbed, obscured, and buried the names of Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, creating a massive, white-dominated narrative that presented space exploration as an exclusive sanctuary of white, male engineering superiority. This was a forbidden history meticulously protected by the traditionalist puppet masters of the era. An ugly truth about how the nation chose to construct its heroes during the height of the Cold War. To truly decode the real reason behind this profound historical amnesia, one must analyze the hyper-volatile propaganda war waged between the United States and the Soviet Union on the global stage. As emerging, newly independent nations across Africa and Asia were choosing between Western democracy and Soviet communism, the United States desperately needed to project an image of flawless moral and technological exceptionalism, admitting to the international community that the ultimate, life-saving mathematics of the American space machine were being solved by African-American women who were simultaneously subjected to the degrading, state-enforced apartheid of Jim Crow would have completely unmasked the devastating hypocrisy of American liberty. Therefore, what they hid from you was a calculated national narrative that prioritized the visibility of the all-white astronaut corps and the pristine, uniform image of mission control, while the secret black scientists who engineered their trajectories were quietly retired, reassigned, or completely ignored in the National Archives. This systematic erasure inflicted an immeasurable, tragic cost on generations of American children, particularly young girls and minority students, who grew up reading textbooks that actively reinforced the destructive myth that advanced mathematics aerospace engineering, and cosmic exploration were entirely outside their intellectual capacity. The profound psychological damage of this erasure created a massive diversity vacuum in the STEM fields for decades. A fatal mistake that starved the nation of untold scientific genius simply because the gatekeepers of history refused to validate the brilliance of non-white minds. For 50 years, these extraordinary women lived quiet, ordinary lives in the shadows of Hampton, Virginia, watching the world celebrate the anniversaries of the moon landings while their own grandchildren remained completely unaware that the very trajectories of those celestial voyages had been calculated by the matriarchs of their own families. This was a disturbing, shocking conspiracy of silence that remained entirely unchallenged until the slow, painstaking process of federal declassification began to unlock the classified files and declassified records of NASA's early operations. When independent researchers and historians finally gained access to these long-forgotten tales, they unearthed a treasure trove of mathematical precision and human endurance that left the modern scientific community utterly speechless. The shocking facts exposed within these unsealed documents revealed that Katherine Johnson's calculations were not just occasional background checks, but the literal, foundational architecture of Project Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, proving that the entire structure of the space age was built upon a bedrock of black intellectual dominance. Unmasking this hidden history was like discovering a parallel universe within the American narrative, a true story of absolute triumph in the face of systematic oppression that forced the nation to finally confront the deep-seated prejudices embedded within its cultural institutions. The cost of this history erasure is the decades of lost inspiration, the millions of minority students who were pushed away from the sciences because they never saw a reflection of themselves in the pages of their schoolbooks. It exposes the painful reality that history is not always an objective recording of facts, but often a curated weapon utilized by those in power to control the collective consciousness of a nation. Warning: do not underestimate the profound impact of this revelation, for it forces us to question what other unsolved mysteries and hidden pioneers remain buried inside the classified archives of the United States government, waiting for the courage of future generations to decode their stories. The declassification of their legacy was not just a victory for historical accuracy. It was a deeply emotional, restorative justice for a group of hidden masterminds who had sacrificed their youth, their energy, and their peace to send their nation to the stars, only to be systematically forgotten by the very country they saved from global humiliation. As these documents were exposed to the light of day, the sanitized myth of the all-white space race was completely shattered, forcing a profound national reckoning regarding the real cost of prejudice and the absolute necessity of reclaiming the forgotten voices that quietly built the modern world. From the shadows of forced invisibility, the institutionalized architecture of American education played a complicit role in this erasure, as powerful textbook adoption boards in conservative states throughout the mid to late 20th century exercised a ruthless rise of editorial censorship, systematically rejecting any historical curricula that highlighted the systemic injustices of segregation or the vital contributions of minorities to national security milestones. This meant that while the technological hardware of NASA advanced at a breathtaking, exponential pace, the sociological narrative taught to American youth remained stubbornly tethered to a romanticized, pre-civil rights fantasy of monolithic white achievement. This deliberate withholding of historical truth acted as a subtle yet highly effective form of structural backstabbing, undermining the legacy of the West Area computers by allowing their files to gather dust in the humid basement archives of Langley while the rest of the nation moved on, blissfully unaware of the immense intellectual debt they owed to these segregated pioneers. The tragic irony was that these women had reached for the infinite potential of the cosmos, mastering multivariable mathematical matrices that bypassed the capabilities of the earliest IBM electronic systems, only to find their personal histories confined to a localized and spoken folklore passed down exclusively through the oral traditions of the black communities of the Virginia Peninsula. When we look at modern America, with its persistent gaps in educational equity and the ongoing struggles for representation in high-tech industries, we are looking directly at the compounding interest of this historical erasure, a stark reminder that when you control the past, you inevitably shape the limitations of the future. The declassification of these secret files was therefore not just an academic exercise, but a radical disruption of the national identity, forcing an uncomfortable yet deeply necessary confrontation with the raw and varnished reality of a nation that achieved its greatest cosmic victory through the labor of the very citizens it legally sought to diminish, exposing the absolute truth that the path to the moon was paved by the unbreakable spirit of scientists who refused to let the smallness of earthly hatred bound the limits of their celestial dreams. The triumphant return of the Apollo missions and the ultimate salvation of the astronauts did not mark the immediate end of the silent warfare waged by the hidden pioneers of NASA, but rather cemented a permanent, unbreakable legacy that would slowly but relentlessly reshape the very fabric of modern America. To look at the contemporary landscape of American technological dominance, from the Silicon Valley tech giants to the advanced aerospace programs of the 21st century, is to look directly at a world built upon the foundations laid by Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson. An untold story of intellectual triumph that could no longer be contained within the classified archives of national security. The true story of their sacrifice connects the cosmic heights of the space race to the grounded, grueling battle for civil rights on Earth, illustrating a profound historical paradox where the nation had to look to its most marginalized citizens to achieve its greatest global milestone. This beautiful defiance against systemic oppression was deeply intertwined with the constitutional promises of the United States, specifically the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, a foundational legal principle that was routinely violated on the segregated grounds of Langley but found its absolute, purest execution in the objective, colorblind laws of mathematics and orbital mechanics. As the decades marched forward, and the civil rights movement successfully dismantled the overt structures of Jim Crow apartheid, the silent masterminds of West Area computing slowly transitioned into legendary figures within the agency, their mathematical precision having rendered them completely indispensable to the ongoing expansion of the Space Shuttle program and the early mapping of Mars trajectories. Warning: do not dismiss their legacy as a mere relic of a bygone era, for the lessons of their struggles remain hyper-relevant to the unresolved cultural and political debates gripping modern American society today. A stark reminder that talent is distributed equally across humanity, but opportunity is historically gatekept by those in power. The shocking facts of their delayed recognition mask the deep-seated prejudices that can paralyze a nation's progress, showing that when systematic exclusion is enforced, a society willingly blinds itself to the very genius required to solve its most complex existential crises. When President Barack Obama awarded Katherine Johnson the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015, the highest civilian honor in the United States, it was a historic, emotionally charged moment of national redemption, a public declassification of a lifetime of hidden brilliance that left the entire country reflecting on the true cost of historical amnesia. This long overdue tribute effectively shattered the sanitized, traditionalist myths of the space age, forcing standard educational systems to finally rewrite their textbooks and expose the real masterminds behind mankind's first steps onto the lunar surface. The legacy of these hidden pioneers serves as a powerful beacon of inspiration for millions of young minds across modern America, proving that intellectual dominance and raw human intellect can completely conquer the most rigid, artificial barriers of social prejudice, providing a timeless blueprint for how a minority population can weaponize technical excellence to force a hostile system to acknowledge their human dignity. As we look back at the trajectory of their lives, from running half a mile across a segregated campus to manually calculating the trajectory of John Glenn's historic flight, we are witnessing a profound human drama that is as epic as any novel but completely grounded in verified historical truth. This forbidden history challenges us to look beneath the polished, official narratives of national triumph and actively seek out the forgotten voices, the secret plot lines, and untold stories that form the true, complex bedrock of the American narrative. Who were the other hidden figures who built the railroads, labored in the early industrial factories, or quietly coded the first digital operating systems while trapped behind the walls of institutionalized discrimination? This is the core mission of our historical exploration: to unmask the raw truth, to celebrate the unbreakable human spirit, and to ensure that no pioneer is ever left stranded in the shadows of forced invisibility. Now, as the final curtain falls on this extraordinary chapter of the cosmic race, the ultimate question rests entirely with you, the brilliant masterminds of our audience. Did this shocking, hidden history of NASA's secret black scientists completely change the way you view America's journey to the moon? Which part of their intense psychological and legal battle left you the most speechless? We want to hear your thoughts, your analyses, and your voices, so please drop a powerful comment down below and join the deep historical conversation with our incredible community. If you believe that these extraordinary women deserve to have their names etched permanently into the memory of human achievement, make sure to smash that like button, share this video with everyone who needs to hear the real truth, and hit that subscribe button with notifications turned on so you never miss another high-stakes, dramatic dive into the deepest, most classified secrets of American history right here on Many Histories. Your incredible support is the literal lifeblood that allows us to keep digging into the archives, unlocking the declassified files, and bringing these forgotten tales of human drama and systemic warfare to light. Thank you for watching. Thank you for standing with the hidden pioneers of the past. And stay tuned as we prepare to step back into the time machine to decode the next explosive and solved mystery that standard school textbooks completely forgot to teach you.